So, Mike, what's Savage Kingdoms?
Well, Savage Kingdoms is a tabletop role-playing game, like a lot of them. It Dungeons and Dragons kind of goes back to 1974. A lot of us gamers were kind of weaned on it, kind of grew up through it. And I always enjoyed it, but I always felt like the system was a little lacking here and there, and I think a lot of us agree. I mean, there's no perfect system or setting, and I always felt like it needed more of a sword and sorcery approach, a little darker fantasy. It was a little too high fantasy for me personally. So I decided to come up with Savage Kingdoms, which is based a little bit more in kind of a dark fantasy sword and sorcery, kind of a Robert E. Howard, Conan the Barbarian, sort of Game of Thrones kind of feel to it. Those are some good inspirations for Savage Kingdoms. Character creation in Savage Kingdoms is it has a familiar feel like a lot of RPGs. You have your attributes. There are 6 main attributes: agility, physique, vigor, intellect, magnetism, and willpower. Those establish kind of your main your main attributes about your character, and then you have derived traits like health and stamina, mobility, luck, renown, that sort of thing. Renown's kind of a cool little thing that a lot of games don't really have. Then you have talents. You can purchase talents, which are kind of like your background skills, particular weird gifts you may have, special combat maneuvers you might have learned. Weaknesses, which are like maybe phobias, or your character is obsessed with Queen so and so, and then there's also skills, of course, that a lot of us realize. There's probably about 25 to 30 skills, ranging from brawling to melee weaponry to stealth to perception, magical arts, etc.
So what I really like about Savage Kingdoms is the world itself. So the whole setting is high fantasy, but the great thing about it is it's not really your standard high fantasy. It's darker, it's more realistic, more mature, and definitely grittier. So you can take it in directions that you don't really get a chance to go with some other fantasy games that are on the market today.
I'd have to say that I'm a big fan of the detail that has gone into the background of the story, and specifically into the different cultures. It really has an effect on your character and the entire world you're based in.
Well, the setting has a very sword and sorcery feel to it. It's very Dark Ages, kind of has a Robert E. Howard feel to it, kind of sort of a Conan the Barbarian, ancient world feel to it. It's a pretty big world. There's a lot of different cultures. It focuses on human adventurers, a lot more human interaction, again, very much like standard sword and sorcery. There are some non-human options, however. The Sleer, the Sleer are kind of a serpentine race, very ancient, enemies of mankind, enslaved humans for thousands of years. They're fading away, about gone now. There's an elven kind of race called the Aluna She, kind of like the She from Celtic lore, very tall and elegant, very mysterious. There's the Durgar, which are also dwarves, although that's kind of a sort of a slur against them to call them dwarves to their faces. They prefer Durgar. And then there are the Dark She, the fallen Aluna She, sort of the unseelie fairy race, a little bit more shadow elves, kind of dark and edgy. Well, the game mechanics in Savage Kingdoms are pretty simple. Action resolution is based on a single roll of a single d20, a 20-sided die. This little guy right here that a lot of us are familiar with. So if you were saying combat, which is kind of a major part of most role-playing games, if you were to attack someone, you would roll your brawling skill if you were punching them, or if you were stabbing a sword at someone, slashing a sword at someone, you'd roll a melee weaponry roll. Range weaponry would be like for a bow or throwing a dagger. And you compare that to the defense roll also of the opponent, and the difference between, if you succeed, is how much damage you deal, depending on weapon type. But so damage in combat is actually figured into the one roll, so it makes combat a little faster and a little more cinematic.
It enables me to not be so restricted by races and classes, but bring my own, what I want to bring to the table in terms of my ideas and the idea that I have of a character. So I don't have to worry about trying to fit into the game so much as I can just allow my character to evolve and my ideas to come out with the whole creative process of it. And I can kind of make it my own.
Well, the combat is very fast-paced, and it has good flow, as the system only runs on a single d20, so it allows for all of your attack rolls and other checks to be computed very easily and very quickly without the need for rolling other dice or, you know, looking through a rule book.
You have any plans for Savage Kingdoms beyond this?
Yeah, that's a very good question. After right now, we're doing the core rule book. It's about 90% done. We're still playtesting, kind of in the beta phase right now, proofreading, tweaking some things. So after the core rule book, we plan on doing a Savage bestiary. So basically, bestiary with the creatures from the world in it. Some sort of known mythological creatures, and then some very unique ones to the setting as well. And then a gazetteer, probably, or campaign setting sort of thing that will also introduce the eastern continent of Hassan and Amanji, which is kind of like an African and sort of Asian continent. And they'll introduce more cultures, a couple more non-human races, and some more talents and other options for characters.